The components that distinguish a mountain bike from other types of bikes, there's a few really different elements. I would say number one is tires. The tires on mountain bikes are very distinguishable, and for a couple reasons. One is going to be the tread. Obviously, if you're riding on a real mountain, you're going to need some kind of heavy-duty tread that can dig into the trail, also be a little bit more durable to go over, sticks and rocks and anything else that might be poking out of the ground. So number one, the tread and the tire, and piggybacking off that also is not just the tire tread, but the tire size. So mountain bikes, there's a couple different popular sizes. Right now there's two, 27.5 inch or 29 inch. And so that size or those two sizes are very particular to mountain bikes. There's no other bikes that use those exact sizes. In addition, with a mountain bike is the suspension. So on mountain bikes, you can actually, there's two types of suspensions. You can have mountain bikes without front suspension. You can have it with front suspension. There's also rear suspension. And you only see mountain bikes having a rear suspension, basically. You don't ever see a rear suspension on any other type of bike. That's not to say now, not all mountain bikes have a rear suspension, some don't. It kind of depends on what type of riding you're doing, downhill, uphill, flat trail, things of that nature. And it also kind of depends on what type of ride you want. Do you want shock absorption? Do you not? Are you going for speed? Are you just going for comfort on the mountain bike? Are you going over large boulders? If you're going over bigger rocks or branches, you probably need a suspension so the wheel can get up and over and go down. So you'll see that on mountain bikes and you won't, but if you see a rear suspension, that's definitely a distinguisher that it's a mountain bike. The other thing I would say is handlebars. Mountain bikes have a pretty straight, flat bar that is very specific to that type of bike. And you generally won't see that across other categories. And then I think lastly, you're going to see a particular type of frame. There's a very particular type of frame shape to a mountain bike, and the way it looks, usually a beefier midsection. Especially men who ride mountain bikes really like to have a beefier frame. There's also reasons for that because it's going to take a beating, going down a hill. So you've got to make sure that the frame is durable, not going to crack, things of that nature. So really those are three of the biggest components that make a mountain bike different, is the tires, the suspension, and the handlebars. At 630, we are definitely not experts in mountain bikes, but I can give you a couple tips, and things to think about when looking for a mountain bike or purchasing a mountain bike. Number one, I think, is know the type of riding you're going to be doing. There's a lot of different combinations of mountain bikes out there, from what type of tire size, tread size, what type of suspension. And so, you could go to your general store and just buy a mountain bike, but if it's not conducive to where you're going to be riding, and how fast you want to ride, you may end up actually getting really hurt. Especially because if you're doing real mountain biking, downhill in particular, you need to have the right brakes, the right type of brakes. There's different types of brakes for mountain bikes, disc brakes, hydraulic brakes, there's, caliper brakes. And so, if you're going downhill at 50 miles an hour, I would recommend don't do caliper brakes. Make sure you have disc or hydraulic brakes. The stopping power is going to be so much greater. So it's really identifying what type of riding you're going to be doing. And I say that specifically with mountain biking because it can be a very dangerous activity. For someone who's riding a cruiser bike and you're just going down the street at 5 miles an hour, the likelihood of equipment failure resulting in injury is very low. On a mountain bike, if you hop onto, let's say, a Walmart mountain bike and you're going to go flying down a hill at 90 miles an hour, I would say that's probably a bad idea. So talk to an expert, really identify where you're going to ride, what's the terrain going to be, how fast are you going to be going, and make sure you match up those components exactly to your riding type. In terms of the specifics, I can make a couple suggestions. I already said one, which is if you're going downhill and you're going at very high speeds, make sure you have a disc brake or hydraulic brake, something that's going to be really powerful and can stop the bike at high speeds. If you're going to be, riding over really, really rocky terrain, make sure you get a heavy duty tread. Make sure, your tread is something that can withstand a lot of thorns or a lot of branches. The other suggestion I would make is going with a tube that is a thorn-resistant tube on the inside of the tire. There's certain types of tubes you can buy that would be less susceptible to popping or losing air. That's going to be really important if you're out in the middle of the woods and you're coming downhill. You don't want to get a flat tire and all of a sudden your bike collapses and you fly over the handlebars or something. And the last thing I'll say about mountain biking is just wear a helmet. Absolutely, when you're out riding a mountain bike and you're doing actual mountain biking, a helmet is a must. I've had numerous friends and acquaintances that have crashed because you never know what the terrain is going to do to you. So you need to make sure you have a helmet on. Now, if you're going to buy a mountain bike and just ride it on the street, that's a whole other conversation that we would say maybe that's not the right bike for you. But if you're doing real mountain biking, make sure that you pay very close attention to the fact that the equipment is matching your riding needs. Some tips to get the most out of your mountain bike. Again, I am not the foremost authority in mountain bikes, but I can give you some at least basic tips that I think will transcend not just mountain bikes, but any bike. But in the specific case of a mountain bike, number one is maintenance. And I think in the case of if you're doing real downhill mountain biking and we're talking, maybe 5 mile downhill trails or 5 mile uphill trails in some real serious rocky terrain or mountainous terrain, it's very important to perform some level of maintenance on your bike before and after riding. If a bike is taking that big of a beating going downhill, especially, guys can reach up speeds of upward, 20, 30 miles an hour. There's a lot of dust and dirt flying in the chain. There's things that may have gotten into the tire, thorns. There's all sorts of things that happen that it's essential you clean that out. If you leave those things sitting and you get onto your bike and maybe your chain locks up and you fly over the handlebars, or there's dust in the brake caliper, or something's not closing correctly and you can't stop all of a sudden, that would be very, very bad. So I would say basically just do at least a simple cleaning after every ride to make sure there's no dirt or residue in any places it shouldn't. And then I would say, if you're riding regularly, twice a weekend or a couple times a week in real mountainous areas, probably performing some kind of maintenance every 2 weeks to 4 weeks, re-greasing your chain, readjusting your brakes just to make sure no tension was lost, retuning the gears just to make sure everything's changing and shifting really on point. Especially this all varies depending on your ride frequency and your ride intensity. So for the guys that are riding, 7 days a week, you better be doing maintenance once a week, and your maintenance better be way more intense. And for those guys, you may need to take components off the bike, clean them, and reinstall them. Because for that kind of riding and those kind of speeds, you need your equipment to be performing at the highest level. For a very novice recreational rider, check your air pressure in your tires. Just make sure that the tires are holding air, it's not leaking, get them up to the recommended PSI, and check your gears. Make sure everything's shifting smoothly, and most important, check your brakes. Pull the calipers, see what the response time is, ride it up and down the street. When you pull the caliper, how quickly does it stop? Just it's a routine check to make sure everything's performing. If there's something out of the scope of what you can do, you should get your bike over to a bike shop before getting it out onto a real mountainous path or trail. But so that's basically it. And if nothing else, make sure you just give your bike a good cleaning to get the dirt out of everything.